6 and no?
11.
Bestuurziger wegen them.
良い一日を。
Sitaki ubenza, anika sirikie.
Two outlaws on the lam, taking the back roads through America.
You can't drink enough coffee for this show.
And now it's time for Monday Madness with the Moped Outlaws, Greg and Mark.
And
We're live
with another episode of Moped Outlaws.
Outlaws.
And you just
show.
Mark,
Today we don't have a guest. In fact,
yeah, because fuck them. We're done with guests. Guests suck, and not in the way we like.
That's right. Right? Virtual reality, schmorality. No. Actually, Greg and I just missed the old days where we talked about stuff and made each other laugh and, gave each other a hard time. And we're just saying how our banter's getting better, but you're not hearing any of it because it's happening offline. It's happening when we're talking behind the scenes. And I love the mystical background you picked for today. This is amazing. It's perfect. It's the full moon. And here we are, another edition, just you and me.
Yeah.
What a long
Two outlaws.
What a long ride it's been. And I think, we were just talking a few minutes ago about how it's been 4 years since George Floyd was killed. And, how are things going?
Murdered. Let's just since George Floyd was murdered.
Okay, we can say it that way. Are you policing my language?
Yeah, and I'm going to step on your neck, bitch.
Oh my God. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about police brutality very much.
No, that is part of the privilege of privilege.
Yep. And I'm a card-carrying white privilege member now.
Yeah. As soon as you get that check, cash it in.
I got it one day I was born. I've been cashing it every day since.
On the day I was born, silver spoon in my mouth.
Yeah. In this case, it was more of a wooden spoon. But hey, who's going to quibble?
It was a hippie painted watercolor spoon.
I wish. I don't want to get too ragging on my parents, but they weren't very good hippies either.
Well, they were interesting. Boy, I have learned some things of your parents and what, I was watching the Dave Chappelle thing again, where he was talking about, I forget the woman's name, but the trans woman in San Francisco that he ended up being friends with. And he's talking about the night where she opened for him and bombed, but then in the audience, she was killing it. And at that one point, it came to a head and someone said something and she yells, "I just want you to know I'm having a human experience." And Dave said, everyone just got it. Fuck, here's an individual just attempting to be human, whatever that is.
Right. And that's kind of what we're all doing. And I see people who are transphobic, and I see parts of myself that are transphobic. And I see trans people and I see all of these things. And I get this mix of compassion because I noticed the process in myself of resistance and wanting to sort of erase trans people because they make me uncomfortable. And then I have to take a minute and breathe into, oh, wait, no, these are people having a human experience. And I get to move beyond this limitation in this moment. And when I do that successfully, a whole other world of comfort opens up, because let's just say it. That's what it's all about. Comfort. No,
comfort. You got to get used to that shaft in the ass,
Yeah. Wait a minute. I don't know how comfortable that is.
I'm just pitching the Division. Is it the Divisadero San Francisco Fair, where it's very famous for the leather and chains and whips?
Yeah, the Folsom Street Fair. Yeah,
Folsom Street Fair and the whip handles and all sorts of good fun.
The
stuff.
home of BDSM, homosexual, lesbian, LGBTQ, and others style. Yeah. Anyway, so because I have to grapple with my own transphobia at a level of conscious awareness, that gives me compassion for the folks that just don't even have that, who are just plain transphobic and horrible to trans people. And I get it. I get why they're that way. And it's up to someone like me to try to like move the needle for them, but not make them wrong. Like that's one of the things that bugs me about a lot of what we're working on in this culture of trying to shift how people judge each other, is that we just go right over to, well, if you don't understand the concepts of, you know, trans rights or LGBTQA rights, then you're shitty, which is like just as bad as saying someone who's shitty, who's trans is shitty. It's like,
Right. And what I just kind of epiphanized with your statement right there is there's a wounded person who's doing that. You know, like we say, hurt people hurt people. And I I think the wounds of an individual who's trans or gender fluid or exploring all those elements of character that while I was growing up was not even fantasy or science fiction. It just wasn't, it didn't exist in my consciousness, I should say.
right.
'Cause obviously
You had no visibility.
right, right. Now it's a very visible thing, right? But someone who's lashing out and angry, there's a lot of hurt that they've experienced that's created that reflexive response.
Yeah, and I think it's perfectly fine to call people in and try to create some connection around moving beyond the limitations of, you know, biased thinking and othering people just because they have a different outlook on life. And so it's really great when someone who has done the work to kind of clear out their own system and be available to mention to people who are hyper reactive, who are triggered by, you know, trans rights or something, to get in there with them and have a human conversation with them and try to bring them around. It's difficult though, you know, it's kind of like going to a Klansman and trying to say, you know, black people are people too. It can be a very fruitless effort and sometimes.
You know, that's interesting because that just reminds me there's a gentleman who's a black gentleman, and he kind of fell into um, befriending people who are clans people or of that thought. And through friendship, they would change their mind. And the way it happened was he was a musician and he met a white gentleman, and that gentleman loved music. And through their love of music, a friendship was created. And the white gentleman happened to be a Klansman. But I guess here's my point is if you jump into a conversation with the resistance element being like you say to me a lot, Greg, why do you just fucking jump right into the shadow? Like ease into it. Like maybe that's part of the conversation is you don't jump in and go, you know, black people are people too. You start a conversation.
Yeah. And the gentleman you're referring to, his name is Daryl Davis, blues
Yeah, that's
musician.
him.
Yeah, I
Have you
looked him
heard
up.
him talk?
I have Google with me, so I'm just supporting the conversation. It's not because I'm so smart. Let me call that out. But I agree with you that there's so many shades of compassion, shades of activism, like this idea of you and I believe both have a core value of we need to step beyond our comfort zone and engage people to try and shift into a more healing posture. And there's a point at which it becomes abusive if you start to go too hard on people about it,
Yeah.
right? And for me, because I think that way, I always think, well, I have to be willing to take a little bit more step than I'd like to, than feels comfortable for me. And as a coach, I've learned some language to how to approach people, and I get consent. Like, hey, are you willing to have a conversation at a deeper level about this? And for the most part, people are pretty receptive, and you know, that gives me hope. And you know, it's really important for me to keep hope alive.
Well, I think one of the things I've come to very much appreciate about our friendship, our brotherhood, and now our working relationship with each other is, I think, we very positively, when things get heated and challenging, we're each willing to just chill in that space and take some breaths and then move through it. And I've never felt like I lost, like I had to acquiesce, give something up. I've never felt that way.
Yeah, it's because I'm a pussy. No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
well, so that's what I'm saying. Partner with a pussy, okay? Learn how to get that thing wet before you
It's
slide
so
it in.
problematic to even refer to it that way, but that's what humor is. What I want to say is that my own
Problematic.
character. What?
Humor's problematic.
In this case, it was. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that I noticed in my own life that my people-pleasing tendencies and my confrontation avoidant personality would have me not show up with my anger, authentic anger. And one of the things I've noticed in my relationship with you is I feel safe being angry with you. And it doesn't mean I want to go there a lot, but I love that I can have that experience and that you'll stay connected with me and that we can work through it.
Yeah,
And I
I
think the
love
same
it.
is true for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I, 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 I think that's something I've learned too. That anger doesn't mean the end; it just means anger.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of taught to dramatize anger, make it more than it really is.
What do you
Maybe
mean?
because, well, it's maybe because our dad punched us when he was angry. At least
My,
mine did.
my dad didn't.
Mine
In
did.
fact, I have this crazy story. One day I was out back getting into trouble, and I knew I was doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing. And I heard my dad yell, "Mark Went, where are you?" And I was like, "Oh shit." And come here. And he brought me upstairs and he's like, "What were you doing? You know you're not supposed to be doing that. Take down your pants." Like he's gonna spank me, right? But I was like, "Oh my god." And then he tickled me.
Okay, that went sideways, my friend. We could
It
take
sure
that
did.
soundbite, and it would just be very awkward.
It was really weird. And I'm not sure whether I would call that good parenting,
Right, I would question that for sure.
but he definitely
Especially
stopped me
where he
from
tickled you,
engaging
like,
in
did you
the
have to take.
shenanigans for sure. The shenanigans came to an abrupt halt.
You know, well, obviously, your dad's had a very human experience,
Oh yeah.
and, phew, it's wild.
Yeah.
I don't feel like we have talked about on a different episode elements of your experience and your dad's experience with who they are and who you are. I don't know. It just doesn't feel, you know what? Do we have permission to say exactly what I'm referring to, or would you rather not in this episode?
I don't care.
All right. So your dad was a walk in. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
my kids are still tripping on that. They're like, "What the fuck?" Like, to have your father come home and go, "You know what? I'm not who you think I am. This marriage is a sham. See ya." And there's the kid
Well,
going,
wait, that's not the part that's relevant to the being the walk-in, because it right? That's what happened. That's the circumstances.
"Yeah,
But
but
if
as
you
a
go back, was it episode 152? I think that where we had, yeah, I think it was 152 where we had a woman talking about spirituality and walk-ins.
and she was a
Um,
walk in." Yeah.
yeah. So the the key difference isn't necessarily, I mean, obviously from my experience, what he did with that decision was
Right.
not
That's what I
fun.
mean. From your viewpoint, that's what happened, right?
Yeah.
Your dad
Well,
came home and said, "I'm not really who you think I am. See ya."
he didn't say that to us. He said it to
Oh,
my mom.
he just disappeared out of your life.
And they just told us again for the second time that daddy was not going to be home anymore.
Wow.
He didn't tell me. I didn't find out why and the whole story of it until I started filming a documentary about him.
Wow. So he told you later on. Your mom never
Yeah.
told.
No. Well, I don't think he told her what happened spiritually until later.
Wow.
Way later.
Wow.
What he did in that moment was he said, "You've always known when you were ovulating, and you tricked me into having these kids. And I don't want to be responsible for them, and so I'm leaving." Now, to be fair, he told me that as sort of like a confession.
Like, I'm sorry kind of thing.
No, the words "I'm sorry" didn't come up. He said, "This is what was going on."
Isn't
So
that what a
maybe
confession's for? Is you want to make amends for something?
well, if you're contrite and then you do the amends, then theoretically, according to the Catholic process, then you're redeemable or whatever. I'm so beyond needing to redeem him because in so many ways it's not for me to say.
Right.
And ultimately, I'm not the man I wouldn't be the man I am without all of the conversations and the philosophical things and the relationship we did have. I value quite a bit. And for a long time, I had a strong victim story going about why I wasn't who I needed to be as a result of what he did. And to some degree, there's some real truth there, but not having that be my story anymore was really, really freeing.
Man, that really resonates with me with Liz and the breakup there, and how I still have remnants of a victim story I'm working on. And I'm working on it, but there's still
Yeah, but she didn't
there.
trick you into having kids, did she?
No, oh no, not at all. But what I'm saying is like that victim story is so pervasive in my experience. It's
Right?
like fungus, its roots go for miles and miles into the psyche and
Yeah.
spirit of a being.
And so many of us are operating from that place and we don't even know it.
Right, exactly.
And then what's beyond that is so powerful and so healing. In
Yeah.
fact, one of the things I do often in my coaching business is work with this book, which is called Beyond Victim Consciousness.
Oh, I thought it was Dr. Seuss.
Well, Dr. Seuss can be helpful, but this book by Lynn Forrest, with Eileen Meagher, who's probably the co-writer or whatever, Beyond Victim Consciousness is a really powerful path to freedom.
That's what the triangle thing you've told me about, right?
Yeah, it's got, Dr. Cartman invented the drama triangle, but this woman mentions it in this book, and she talks about the redeemed quality of it. And rather than go into a whole thing, just Google Cartman triangle, folks, or buy that book. There's a lot of freedom.
Carpet triangle? That sounds like
carpet triangle. That's what you
pubic
do.
hair.
That's past the belly button, right? No, it's the Cartman triangle.
Now we're in South Park, the Cartman triangle. Holy Christ, this thing.
Oh my God. They killed the Moped Outlaws. No, they killed themselves. They start out talking about woke consciousness, and then they just degraded themselves down into pussy jokes.
God bless a pussy.
Oh, did he ever? It's the most is it Cat Williams who said that was the greatest invention by God ever? I think that's Cat Williams' line.
That sounds like a Cat Williams line, yeah.
Let me just say to women, like, if this offends you and you don't like the use of the word, I just want you to know what a rich, loving appreciation I have for the meaning of this word. And I'm sorry that you're offended. And I clearly have more work to do, but by God.
Hey, have you seen Nikki Glaser's stand-up that's on Netflix, where she has a good, it's at least 20 minutes of pussy and getting fingered and sex, and it's just filled with bangers, man. It is so good. It is so good.
Bangers. He said bangers.
One of my favorite.
Suddenly, we're 14 years old, Greg.
Yeah.
We just reverted to our adolescent modality here. Yeah. All right, well, let's try to take a deep breath.
Let me hold on to my penis.
Restore our higher level of vibration and consciousness.
Right,
and
what were you talking about before we got sidelined so emphatically?
Well, walk-ins and the difference between my dad telling my mom something that he he told me something completely different 40 years later, right? And 50 years later, now that I think about it. And what his experience that he related to me was that he went on a walk while he was tripping on mushrooms, and he had a kind of melancholy that was going on, clearly because he was the father of 3 kids and not working. And he said he heard a voice from God, and then the self that he was, the soul that he was, left, and the thing that he is now became his soul. Now, in the last discussion we had about this, I was like, well, that sounds like psychosis to me. And I'm willing to sit with the fact that it could be both. It could have been a trip, and it could have been like a spiritual shift, because our previous guest did not have any psychedelic triggers to what happened for her. Right. And the concept of souls walking in is not an unusual concept. I mean, I first heard of it when I was in my early teens from a Carlos Castaneda book. So that's what we were talking about before we went down the adolescent regression rabbit hole.
Is that what we refer to pussies as? The adolescent regression rabbit hole?
No, I do not refer to them that way, sir.
I do, obviously.
Yeah, so there's joy in letting yourself just relax and be yourself, even with your shadows. And I think there's something about being able to do that is really unhelpful to healing people. No, I'm just...
Well, you know what that just reminded me is, this has been really sticking with me, and I heard it a week ago, of knowing when your discomfort is healing you and knowing when it's just bringing you down. And I believe the ability to differentiate is important in one's life.
Yeah. Discernment is key for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love how we've been calling ourselves back into consciousness in this conversation. It's a good sign. And I think it's also a good sign that we're willing to be vulnerable and transparent about the silly, regressive, adolescent aspects of ourselves we're still carrying around. Hopefully, anyone that's listening to this can kind of take a sigh of relief, just relax. You know, we're all working so hard to be perfect. And it's okay, right? It's going to be okay, right?
Is it though? Is it really?
It is. It's going to be okay. And if it's not, you're going to die anyway. And
did you see the, was it on Amazon, Fallout, the series Fallout?
No, because I've never watched that show. So whatever it is,
really
I haven't
good.
seen it. What is it you want to tell me about?
So the world's getting blown up by nuclear bombs, and there's these huge bomb shelters that have been created by this company, and the surface, like what everyone's told, is the purpose was to preserve humanity in such a manner that they could come back to the surface of Earth in a new transformed social realm. So like when the Earth finally is habitable again, they've lived in such a manner that this will never be repeated. But of course, you get deeper and deeper into it, and there's all sorts of dark shit going on. It's kind of the stereotypical a hive of people who have been sequestered away from what's really going on. And one of this young girl goes to the surface to find her mom or her dad. But then,
that's right. I have seen the first season of that. Now that you mention it, I have seen this. It's really interesting because there's some political lies being told from the leadership in the fallout shelter. And that's the core thing, is that even though supposedly things are, and the thing about it is the storyline takes place several generations down the line. Like they don't know any other way of living other than inside the shelter. And I think it's a metaphor for humanity becoming fully expressed. Is like we stay in these safe little caverns and we believe what we're told because it's nice and safe and it gives us a structure. And then the reality is outside the bubble, it's wild, it's dangerous, you're going to die.
Right.
And that's where all of the evolution is. That's where all of the human
That's
growth
reality.
is.
Right. That's what I love, that kind of element. Like when I forget what they call the people who are like walking dead, like they can't die because they've had that serum put in them, like his face, the main cowboy dude.
I don't think I've gotten to that part in the series.
Oh man. Because there's this one element, she meets this dude, and he becomes a main character in it. And in essence, he says to her, well, to stay on this quest you have, you're not going to be the person who started the quest. Your quest may not matter to you anymore. You are
Right.
going to change.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, an interesting metaphor again for our personal lives, and to some degree there's something to be said about keeping it kind of tight and safe and not getting too far out of bounds. It's very conducive to, creating paying off a mortgage and raising kids and having keeping your job for 30 years, and this thing that we identified as the capitalist American dream, which doesn't seem to work very well for a majority of people, but for the minority, they are encouraged to stay in there, and it seems to function. Like I've felt the envy, having been a hippie wild child in my
Right.
life. There were moments where I was like, oh my God, that Irish Catholic family has it so good. And the reality is, of course, they don't. The alcoholic father,
Right.
the resentful mother, the incest that occurred, the sexual trauma, like, oh my God. And so
Well, you had some interesting neighbors.
well, yeah.
Did you ever see Blue Velvet? Remember that movie from, I think it was
I saw it. I don't remember it.
do you remember
I,
the
I should
opening?
watch it again.
Do you remember the very opening? The opening titles is this very serene small town USA, a parade, fire truck, people waving, and you go through this white picket fence in the grass, and it goes to the grass, and then it goes like down into the dirt. You have worms and bugs and shit crawling. Do you remember
I don't
that?
remember that, but it sounds really artistic.
It was brilliant. And kind of what I loved is it's just setting up, here's this serene, beatific thing, and underneath is a whole
Earth.
lot going
Yeah.
on.
Right. Life is a process of growth and decay all the time, simultaneously occurring.
Right. And this is coming back to the beginning of this conversation, like the people who are transphobic. And as you said, you're dealing with your own transphobia. You see it and then you work to heal it. I myself have definitely been doing that myself, working with, um, I'd say, homophobia and transphobia. And then when the gender thing came, there was a real like, what the fuck is going on? And then I'd have conversations and go like, oh, there is thought and consciousness to what's going on. But that initial fear, and it's like feeling something in me that I'm afraid of, so I lash out.
Mm, mm. Fear is the mind killer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes us right out of consciousness.
Yep.
It's funny because one of the most powerful examples that I have of liberation was when I was devoted to martial arts practices in my teenage years, because it did two things for me. One, I realized that the most powerful way to be a powerful combatant is to be not angry, is to be in my conscious awareness and really have a heightened ability to sense and feel, right?
Mhm.
Because when you're angry, you're provocable and you're off balance. And at the same time, the whole thing's about learning to fight, which is sort of an odd juxtaposition. And
Did
then
you did you find that anger was a tool that you learned to channel into like your chi to heighten your chi? So instead of being at the mercy of anger, you were a master of anger?
I don't think I would say that I got through the process you described. No. I would, at this point in life, I have a much more powerful awareness and capacity for that process you just described, for sure. Back then, I just had so much latent anger right? Which is one of the reasons earlier in this conversation we talked about how I haven't felt safe in my life to be angry, right? So when it's bottled up like that, it's the shadowy nature of it and its uncontrollability is much more intense, right? So at that point in my life, I was like, I could transmute anger better when I was practicing martial arts, but it was still a very volatile experience compared to where I am now.
You know what I'm wondering? I was just thinking of the deities that I'm aware of that really embody that chaotic, angry, destructive element of energy, Pele and Kali.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, well, is there a male deity? And I thought the god of war, Mars. And I was wondering, is that deity depicted with the elements of femininity, such as Kali and Pele, where there's also a deep compassion those entities have?
Well, they're totally different cultural roots for each of those characters, right?
Right.
Mars is, I think, Greek,
Greek, I think.
and Pele is, indigenous Pacific Islander, and then Kali is, I
Hindu.
think, Hindu,
Yeah, I think so.
right? So there's 3 different geographies and 3 different lineages for those things. The Greeks were tended to, what we know about the Greeks from this current vantage point, there might have been something different back then, was that there was this aspect of masculinity in the gods. Like most of the named gods that I'm aware of were male in a certain sense. And it's interesting to me that Hindu and indigenous Pacific Islanders had a more feminine god for destruction. But it's also, they also give life. That's the thing, is they clear.
Right, that's what I mean. Like the destruction wasn't just for the sake of destruction. Like I've heard, I think I've said it on one of our other episodes, that I heard this one monk saying that Kali was also goddess of compassion, one of the most compassionate of the deities.
Yeah, Shiva and Shakti are the normal versions, and Kali's arises, I think, out of Shakti's point of view. Now, I'm gonna have to look this up because I'm so bad at actually understanding this particular lineage. So
give us one moment. ChatGPT.
I'm not asking ChatGPT. Okay, of course I'm not getting the answer. Oh, Kali and Durga are the 2 shadowy. So Shakti stands for the immanent aspect of the divine and the active part in the act of creation. And that's feminine. So Shakti's the feminine.
Right.
And then Shiva is the masculine. And then Kali, therefore Shiva defines the trait specific to pure transcendence and is normally associated with this point of view. A manifestation of Shakti, who is somewhat stronger, such as Kali and Durga. So they each have, and I don't know much about Durga.
Yeah, I think that's the goddess of death.
I don't know.
Shadow, dark.
Goddess Durga, facts, meaning, iconography. It's in Sanskrit. I can't read it. Anyway, rather than go down this particular cultural investigation, just say we're ignorant of these things.
Yep.
And we're curious about the divine feminine goddesses and this idea of anger and destruction as a natural phenomena necessary to growth.
And that it's a feminine aspect. And I was wondering if, like, these other deities that have were created to show embodiment of destruction and that anger aspect of a human being, did they also have feminine qualities? Because there's a balance, I think, to Kali and Pele in that.
I think everything has its dual nature of growth and decay. But then you see, if you through Taoism and through the, you see that it's actually one thing with those polarities in it, right?
The
yin yang,
eating its tail.
The yin yang, right? All of it, which is why those symbols are so powerful. And one of the things that's true is, to my right, I have a statuette of Kali with all of her knives and chopped off heads, and she has skulls all along her belt.
Yeah.
She's,
And also, isn't she standing on a hill, like a bed of skulls?
no, she's standing on top of her lover,
Oh,
right? But
yeah.
he's not dead. He's just yielding. So that's as far as I know of the legend, is that there's an element of him not fearing her, and he's just like, you can stand with your foot on my chest, I'm fine. Where, right? And I think it's the symbolism there is that the resistance to the wildness is what actually is the thing that gets your head chopped off.
Right. That I think is also a vibe in so much romantic storytelling. Like that right there is Tam Lin, and that Peter Nevins did that, and Neil gifted it to me. And that's the story where she meets her lover, and he's going to turn into all these ferocious animals. And if she just still loves him, then at the very end of all these transformations will be her one and true lover. And I think kind of like when I think of romantic love, that's what I'm looking for. Like that person who could be with my darkest self and still see the light in me. And we stand together through this human experience.
I think that's beautiful. And it just goes to show you what an amazing wild ride you can have on Moped Outlaws. Like, we start a conversation. In a way, it's like we shouldn't have guests anymore because we're just so deep and so full of shit. And it's just super entertaining. We do. We have had some really good guests. And, we went on that vacation and we were like, we made an agreement. Like, we weren't going to tolerate anything less than really up and together.
Yeah.
I'm really glad we decided to do this. And I think this is a good point to just let people know that what happened was we had a guest who just was a no-show.
Yeah.
And I'm sad because this particular guest I resonated with because he's a men's coach. He's and his whole website's all about integrity and about his vision. And then he didn't show.
Yeah.
Even after he said, "Oh yeah, I'll see you. Can't wait to see you."
Yeah.
So let's take a moment, take a deep breath, and pray for his well-being, because that is what matters most, is that he's safe. And the little differentiation that we didn't get to have him here, I hope that nothing has happened that has caused him pain or suffering or anything that would have him not be here because of that.
That's it's wild because like that's what I want to resonate with. But what is so up in my surface is a knee jerk, like, oh, fuck you. Your integrity. Oh yeah, really? You said you were going to be here 2 hours ago.
Right. And then here it is. Like, I'm pointing a finger, right?
Yeah.
But how many are pointing back at me?
All of them?
3 of them. Right? Whenever you're pointing the finger at someone else, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you.
What if you point the finger like this? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. None pointing back. Okay. What if you point the finger like this? Okay, there's one pointing up and the rest are pointing down. Okay, none pointing at me. Okay.
I love that accent. I don't know who that character is, but I think it's funny.
Took it from Talbs.
Talbs. Yeah, Tim Talbot, man. Wow. Tim Talbot is a boho, a really funny guy, very troubled soul, Irish alcoholic, poet, amazing poet. And also he was so full of himself. It made him entertaining and fun to be around, but it was also the thing that caused him the most pain. Right. And Talbs, man, we miss you.
Yeah, and just a footnote to that, it's like I remained pretty close with him to the end, and he did a lot of work in his life. He was not as full of himself in the last few years as he was when I first met him. We've all hopefully matured and gotten wiser, like wine.
Yeah, we're just this side of vinegar, Greg.
Vinegar has uses too. Thinking of pussies. Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
Where'd this go? Always back to the 14-year-old. Always like a bomb.
Oh my God.
That's BALM. Bomb. Right. Not
Bomb.
BOMB.
Well, it's been fun.
It has been.
I think spending time with you is one of the great gifts of my life. And I'm so grateful for this audience. And fuck you, Greg.
Recording stopped.